Napa Halloween Murders, Napa County. On Halloween night in Napa Valley, almost 20 years ago, three roommates named Lauren, Adrienne, and Leslie were at home together. They had spent the evening handing out candy to kids in the neighborhood. After that, they relaxed, watched TV, and then went to bed. Lauren went to her room around 11 p.m. Later in the night, she woke up suddenly because her dog, Chloe, began barking at the window. A motion light outside had turned on, which usually happened when a cat walked by. Lauren thought it was probably the same thing, so she tried to calm her dog and go back to sleep. But then she heard screaming. She knew right away something terrible was happening inside the house. She ran to her bedroom door but stopped when she heard footsteps coming down the stairs. She was more scared than she had ever been in her life. Not knowing what else to do, she ran out the back door into the yard. She did not know if the intruder had seen or heard her escape. She hid outside, shaking, waiting to hear what would happen next. After a moment, Lauren thought she heard someone climbing out a window. She wasn't sure where the person went, but she knew she had to help her friends. She went back inside and tried to use the home phone, but it wasn't working. She rushed upstairs and saw blood on the walls. It looked like something out of a horror movie. She found both of her roommates on the floor. Leslie was already dead, and Adrienne was badly hurt and barely alive. Lauren grabbed her cell phone, took her dog with her, and ran to her car to call the police. She was terrified the killer might return. The police told her to go back to the house, even though she did not know if it was safe. They arrived a little after 2 a.m., and soon after that, Adrienne died too. The entire attack had taken only minutes, and Lauren was the only survivor. Months before the murders, Lauren and Adrienne had rented the house together. Later, they invited Leslie to move in, and the three of them became close friends. They enjoyed living together, which made the loss even harder for everyone who loved them. After the murders, investigators searched the house for clues. They found blood on the blinds, which showed where the killer likely came in. Outside the house, they found cigarette butts. None of the roommates smoked, so it seemed the killer had been waiting outside for some time. The police believed the killer might have known the girls because the attack was so violent. Police talked to neighbors, friends, ex-boyfriends, and many other people. But because it was Halloween, the streets had been full of people in masks and costumes, so it was hard to know who might have been near the house. The case became more confusing and frightening as more time passed with no answers. Lauren lived in fear every day, wondering if the killer might come back. As months went by, there were still no new leads. Lauren tried to think of anyone who might want to hurt her friends, but she couldn't think of anyone. Out of desperation, she even went to two psychics and shared what they said with police, but this did not solve the case. Almost a year after the murders, police decided to release one detail to the public. The cigarette butts found outside were a rare brand called Camel Turkish Gold. Some stores sold only 1 or 2 packs a week, so this detail created pressure on the killer. Only 5 days later, a man walked into the police station and turned himself in. His name was Eric Koppel. Eric was the husband of Lily, who had been Adrienne's best friend. Eric had even helped Adrienne and Lauren move into the house. He had been close to the group, and he had even attended events with them. The friends and families were shocked and devastated. No one had suspected him. Police learned that on Halloween night, Eric had fought with his wife, and she had left him at home. He had been drinking heavily. He later said he remembered grabbing a knife and leaving the house, but he never gave a clear reason for why he attacked the two women. Evidence from the crime scene matched his DNA, and the case against him was very strong. Police learned that earlier in the year, Lily had broken off her engagement with Eric because of his drinking. Adrienne had supported Lily during that time and had encouraged her to think about her future. Police believed Eric felt Adrienne was in the way of his relationship, and that anger grew inside him until he chose to attack her and Leslie. In 2006, Eric Koppel pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder. He avoided the death penalty but was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Lily later divorced him. Today, Adrian and Leslie are still remembered by their families and friends. Leslie had been passionate about helping children, and a cottage was later built in her name to support kids in need. Adrian's family keeps her memory alive in many small, loving ways, like keeping her car just the way she left it. Lauren still honors her friends and carries their memory with her every day. She believes their spirits stay connected to her, and she continues to share their stories so they will never be forgotten. Scott and Laci Peterson case, Modesto. The case of Scott and Laci Peterson is one of the most well-known crime stories in the United States. People are supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. But when Laci Peterson went missing in late 2002, many people quickly began to believe that her husband, Scott, was responsible. His behavior from the start made him look suspicious. He told his girlfriend, Amber Frey, that his pregnant wife had already died, even though Laci was still alive at the time. He gave different stories about what he had been doing on the day she disappeared. People even said he laughed at a candlelight vigil held for Laci. He also sold her car before her body was found, which made people think he was trying to move on too fast. On December 24, 2002, Laci vanished. Scott said he last saw her at about 9:30 that morning at their home in Modesto, California. She was almost 8 months pregnant with their son, Connor. He claimed she was going to take the dog for a walk while he went fishing. A large search began right away, involving police, volunteers, and even federal agents. But Scott did not seem worried or emotional, and this made investigators pay close attention to him. His stories did not stay the same, and he acted strangely for someone whose pregnant wife had just disappeared. In January 2003, everything became worse for Scott when Amber Frey came forward. She said she had been dating Scott for 2 months and did not know he was married. When she saw his face on the news beside a story about a missing pregnant woman, she immediately contacted police. This made many people believe Scott had been living a double life. By March 2003, police officially said they believed Laci had been the victim of a crime. Then, on April 13th and 14th, 2 bodies were found on the shoreline of the San Francisco Bay. First, the body of a fetus was found. The next day, a badly damaged woman's body was discovered nearby. These were later confirmed to be Laci and Connor. The bodies were discovered only 1 to 2 miles from the place Scott said he had gone fishing on the day Laci disappeared. This raised even more suspicion. On April 18, 2003, Scott was arrested near San Diego, close to the Mexican border. He had $15,000 in cash, several phones, and his brother's ID. He had dyed his hair blonde. Many people believed he was trying to run away. Scott pleaded not guilty, but the trial moved forward. Because the case had received so much attention, the trial was moved to another county. It began in June 2004, and the prosecution argued that Scott wanted freedom and a life without responsibility, so he killed his wife and unborn child. Amber Frey played a major role during the trial. She testified for 7 days, and the jury listened to hours of phone calls between her and Scott. Her testimony showed that Scott had been lying to her over and over again, even saying he was spending his first Christmas without his wife, while Laci was still alive and missing. After hearing from more than 180 witnesses, the jury began to deliberate. On November 12, 2004, they found Scott guilty of first-degree murder for Laci and second-degree murder for baby Connor. Even though there was no murder weapon and no direct physical proof, the jury believed the large amount of circumstantial evidence. In December, they recommended the death penalty, and in March 2005, Scott was sentenced to death. Scott continued to say he was innocent. His lawyers argued that the trial had been unfair because of the huge amount of publicity. They also said the judge made mistakes when choosing jurors. After years of appeals, Scott's death sentence was overturned in 2020 because some jurors had been dismissed unfairly. However, the murder convictions stayed in place. In 2021, Scott was resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Many people still argue about why Scott may have done this. Some believe he wanted to live a single life again. Others think money problems were part of the reason. A well-known true crime writer, Aphrodite Jones, believes the real reason was the baby. She believes Scott was a selfish and narcissistic man who could not handle the idea that a new baby would take attention away from him. In her opinion, Scott wanted to get rid of the baby more than anything else. She does not believe Amber Frey had anything to do with the motive. She says Scott had cheated before, and that Amber was just one of several affairs. She believes the coming birth of his son made Scott feel like he would no longer be the golden boy he had always been in his family. The evidence against Scott was mainly based on his behavior and many strange details around the case. He cleaned the house, washed his clothes, and ate lunch before calling Laci's family. He told different stories about what he had done that day. Police found concrete dust in his boat and warehouse, hair matching Laci's on tools, and signs that Scott had been studying ocean tides near the exact place the bodies washed up. A cadaver dog picked up Laci's scent near Scott's boat. Investigators also discovered signs that someone had dragged something heavy inside the house. Scott bought a small fishing boat with cash, did not tell anyone about it, and took it out on the exact day Laci disappeared. To this day, Scott Peterson says he did not kill his wife or unborn son, but many people believe the evidence tells a different story. The case continues to be discussed by true crime fans, legal experts, and people who still wonder what truly happened to Laci and baby Connor. Onion Field Murder, Los Angeles, Bakersfield. Los Angeles in the early 1960s was a bright and busy place where many people hoped to build a good life. But even in a city full of sun and opportunity, bad things could still happen. One night in 1963, a simple traffic stop turned into a tragic event that deeply affected the Los Angeles Police Department for many years. This incident later became known as the Onion Field case. On the night of March 9, 1963, two LAPD officers, Ian Campbell, age 31, and his partner, Carl Hettinger, age 28, were working in an unmarked police car in Hollywood. Both men had experience on the job and were doing their normal patrol. As they drove, they noticed an older Ford car sitting in a strange way at a street corner. Something about the car seemed off, so the officers decided to check it out. Inside the Ford were two men, Gregory Powell, age 30, and Jimmy Lee Smith, age 32. Both men had long criminal histories and were carrying guns. When officers Campbell and Carl approached the car, the situation changed very quickly. Powell suddenly pulled out a gun and pointed it at Campbell. Campbell remained calm and quietly told Carl to hand over his weapon so neither of them would be shot on the spot. Carl did what his partner asked, hoping to avoid violence. The officers were then forced into the suspect's car. Powell drove while Smith watched them from the front seat. They drove away from the city and headed north toward the countryside. As the city lights faded, both officers realized they were in serious danger. After a long, intense drive, Powell stopped the car in a remote onion field near Bakersfield. The area was empty, quiet, and far from any help. In the field, Powell suddenly shot Officer Ian Campbell at close range. Carl ran into the darkness as fast as he could. He had no idea where he was going, but he knew he had to escape. He ran for several miles across the fields until he found a farmhouse. The people inside called the police, and Carl was finally safe. However, the death of his partner and the fear of the night left deep emotional wounds that lasted for the rest of his life. A huge manhunt began right away. Police officers across Southern California searched for the two suspects. Carl, although shaken, gave a clear description of both men. Later that night, highway patrol officers spotted Powell in a stolen vehicle and arrested him. Smith was caught the next day. The city felt a mix of anger, sadness, and relief. Both suspects went to trial and were sentenced to death. However, in 1972, California changed its laws and ended the death penalty at that time. Because of this, both men had their sentences reduced to life in prison. Years later, in 1982, Jimmy Lee Smith was released on parole. This upset many people, especially Officer Campbell's daughter, Valerie. She worked with a group called Citizens for Truth to stop Powell, the other suspect, from being released as well. They collected more than 30,000 signatures and convinced the parole board to cancel Powell's release. Powell's lawyers fought back, and for a while it seemed like he might be freed. But after more legal action, higher courts decided he should stay in prison for life. Powell died in prison in 2012. Smith, who continued to get into trouble after his release, also died in 2007. The effects of the Onion Field case were not limited to the suspects. Officer Hettinger suffered greatly after the event. Instead of receiving full support from other officers, some people in the department questioned his actions and even blamed him for surviving. This caused him years of guilt and emotional distress. His story was later used in police training to teach officers how to stay safe during traffic stops. In 1966, Carl left the police department after being accused of shoplifting, something that only added to his struggles. But later in life, he rebuilt his reputation and served the public as a county supervisor. He passed away in 1994. Officer Ian Campbell was remembered as a brave man who lost his life while doing his job. Gypsy Hill Killings, San Mateo County. This is the story of Rodney Halbauer, the man linked to the Gypsy Hill murders, also known as the San Mateo Slasher. His life and crimes show a long path of trouble, violence, and choices that hurt many people. There is a simple idea in psychology called blank slate. It says that people are shaped mostly by the things that happen to them, not by some evil gene. But when you hear about people like Rodney, you start to wonder. He grew up with trouble, but some of his choices were so cruel that many believe he must have had something dark inside him from the start. Rodney Halbauer was born on June 27, 1948, in Wisconsin. Soon after, his parents moved the family to Muskegon, Michigan. He had 3 brothers, John, Gary, and James. Rodney was not like those gifted kids you see playing piano at age 3 or solving math like geniuses. Instead, his talent, if you can call it that, was crime. And even then, he wasn't good at getting away with it. He got caught over and over again. Rodney's first run-in with the law happened when he was only 9 years old. He was caught smashing windows in houses around his neighborhood. The sheriff brought him home and gave him a warning. That should have been the end of it, but for Rodney, it was just the beginning. His brother later said Rodney skipped school a lot, was a loner, and acted like a bully. While other kids collected toys or baseball cards, Rodney collected a list of crimes. Nothing serious happened to him until he turned 13. That year, he stole a car, drove it around, and crashed it. He was arrested, kicked out of school, and sent to juvenile hall. Rodney hated being locked up and even escaped once, though he was caught again soon after. This became a pattern for him: crime, arrest, escape, and repeat. At 16, he was released on probation. During this time, he had a girlfriend and even had a daughter named April. But he also kept getting into trouble. In 1964, he was arrested for burglary and sent to prison for 5 years. When he got out in 1969, now 20 years old, he quickly went back to crime. After stealing from a grocery store, he was put in the police car while officers searched for the stolen items. He broke out of the car and ran, even with handcuffs still on. He stayed on the run until August 1970, when police tried to pull him over while he was driving with his girlfriend and daughter. Instead of stopping, Rodney sped off. He ran 20 stop signs and 8 red lights before crashing into a house. Then he jumped out and ran again. This time he was caught and given 4 years in prison. He actually served all 4 years and was released in 1975 at age 27. Rodney then moved to Reno, Nevada, thinking a new place might give him a fresh start. At first, he worked a regular job and lived quietly, but this did not last. In November 1975, a 33-year-old woman was walking home from her job as a blackjack dealer. Rodney attacked her with a knife, dragged her behind an apartment building, and assaulted her. Thankfully, she survived and ran straight to the police. Her description matched a man the police had actually questioned earlier that same day for arson. When they arrested him, it turned out to be Rodney again. He stayed in jail for a month but was able to pay bail and get out. In April 1976, he went to trial for the assault and was sentenced to life in prison. But the darkest part of the story happened while Rodney was out on bail. This is where the Gypsy Hill murders come in. a group of violent attacks and killings of young women in the San Mateo area of California. Not every case was 100% proven by DNA, but investigators strongly believe Rodney was responsible for all of them. The first known victim was 18-year-old Veronica Ronnie Castillo. She was last seen on January 7, 1976. Her body was found the next day on a golf course. She had been stabbed 30 times. Next was 14-year-old Tanya Blackwell, who went missing on January 24th while walking to a 7-Eleven store. Months later, her body was found near Gypsy Hill Road. She had also been stabbed. 2 weeks later, on February 6th, the body of 17-year-old Paula Baxter was discovered near a church in Millbrae, California. She had been assaulted, beaten, and stabbed. Another victim linked to the same attacker was 19-year-old Michelle Mitchell, found in a garage in Reno, Nevada. She had car trouble near the university where she studied. Her hands were tied, and her throat had been cut. 3 weeks later, on March 15th, the last known victim, 26-year-old Carol Lee Booth, was found. Her body was discovered in a shallow grave. These murders were brutal, sudden, and mostly the same style, which is why investigators believed they were all done by one person, Rodney Halbauer. Even though Rodney was finally locked up, the damage he caused was huge. Murder of Jack Jessee, Orange County. He was a good father, grandfather, brother, and friend. People cared about him. But someone close to him decided that Jack should die, and that they did not want to wait. This is the story of Jack's murder. Jack was 56 years old when he was found dead on August 13, 1998. His daughter Cheryl found him on the floor in the living room of his home in Placentia, California. Jack had been stabbed 11 times with a double-edged knife. He had been weak because he recently had 2 surgeries, so he could not fight back. After the killer stabbed him, the killer left a trail of blood to the bathroom sink, cleaned himself up, and then used a walkie-talkie to signal his getaway driver. Jack loved his family. He worked as a mechanical engineering manager. He liked classic cars and sports, especially the Raiders and Dodgers. He also didn't like guns and sometimes didn't even lock his doors. He was a kind man who enjoyed simple things. Jack's brother David remembered a strange thing Jack once said. Jack told him that if anything ever happened to him, his wife Sandra would be the one responsible. At the time, David brushed it off. Jack met Sandra at work in the early 1980s. They married in 1984. Sandra already had 2 children and had been married twice before. When Jack became sick and needed help after his surgeries, Sandra did not want to care for him. A nurse tried to teach her how to help Jack with a medical bag, but Sandra ran to the corner of the room, covered her ears, and said she would not do it. She was so upset by the idea of caring for her husband that she decided he needed to die. Jack also had a large amount of money in his retirement account and life insurance, which made Sandra even more eager to get rid of him. Sandra's son, Thomas Allert, told his friend Brett Schrauben about the plan. Sandra was willing to pay $50,000. Schrauben agreed, but wanted $5,000 up front. Sandra paid him, gave him a photo of Jack, and even handed him a drawing of the inside of the house. Schrauben lived in Arizona, and later he claimed that he did not actually do the stabbing. He said another man, Thomas Garrick, carried out the killing while he acted as the getaway driver. Garrick denied this and was later found not guilty. But what is known for sure is that someone went into Jack's house during a 15-minute window when Cheryl left to look for Sandra, and Jack was stabbed to death. Sandra told police she had only been gone for an hour to buy food and run errands, but store receipts showed she had actually been gone almost 2 hours. There was a 63-minute time gap she could not explain. The chicken nuggets she brought home were cold, and the ice she bought was already melting. Police began to suspect her right away. Sandra refused to help investigators. She would not give fingerprints and ignored calls from detectives. With not enough evidence at the time, the case went cold. Sandra received more than $770,000 from Jack's accounts. Years later, 2 investigators from the Orange County Sheriff's Department reopened the case. Jack's brother David had never stopped pushing for justice. The detectives found an old report from an anonymous caller who said exactly what had happened. Sandra and her son had hired a hitman from Target. The caller turned out to be a man named Mike Kalovic, who had overheard Schrauben talking in a bar. Police used wiretaps and surveillance to catch Sandra, Thomas, and Schrauben talking about the murder years later. Eventually, Schrauben was arrested and, after many months, confessed. Sandra and her son were arrested in 2007. At the first trial in 2009, the jury was one vote away from finding Sandra and her son guilty. In 2011, he testified that his mother was the one who planned the murder. He pled guilty and took a 15 years to life sentence. Sandra went to trial again in 2011. She claimed she was innocent and said she loved Jack, but the evidence showed otherwise. After only 4 hours, the jury found her guilty of murder for financial gain and conspiracy. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 25 extra years. Jack's family was heartbroken. They loved him dearly and knew he was already very sick. His autopsy showed his cancer was so advanced that he only had about 6 weeks left to live. If Sandra had waited, she would have received his money legally. Instead, she planned his violent death and spent the rest of her life in prison. Jack Jessee was a gentle, trusting man who did not deserve the way his life ended. His family fought for years to make sure justice was done. Maya Millete case, San Diego. Maya Tabalanza Millete was born on May 1, 1981, in the Philippines. She was the fifth of 6 children born to Paito and Noami Tabalanza. As a child, Maya was very bright and did well in school. In March 1995, when she was 13, her family moved to Honolulu, Hawaii. There, she went to Radford High School and joined clubs like drama and dance. Maya worked hard and graduated with honors. At 17, she got a job at McDonald's, where she met Larry Millete, who would later become her husband. They started dating, and 2 years later, Maya went to the University of Hawaii to study international studies, while Larry trained in the Navy in Virginia. Eventually, they moved to San Diego, where Maya finished her degree with honors. After graduation, Maya worked for the U.S. Navy as a civilian contract specialist at Naval Base San Diego. She was known as hardworking and dedicated. In 2010, she and Larry started their family. They had 3 children, a daughter, Laura, followed by another daughter, Milani, and a son, Lazarus. Maya loved being a mother. She made sure her children had a happy life, and she supported them in school, sports, and other activities. Maya also enjoyed hiking, biking, camping, off-roading, and traveling with her family. She was kind, charitable, and always willing to help others. When her family visited the Philippines, they often gave school supplies to children in rural areas. Maya also taught herself to play the guitar and piano. By January 2021, Maya was 39 years old, living with her husband and 3 children in Chula Vista, California. However, her relationship with Larry had problems since late 2020. He became controlling and paranoid after learning about an alleged affair. Maya wanted a separation and divorce. Larry sometimes showed up unannounced at her workplace and kept close watch on her. Friends said he had been physically abusive, once strangling her until she lost consciousness. She even considered moving to a safe house offered by a friend. She confided in others that she was unhappy and wanted to leave Larry to protect her family. On January 7, 2021, Maya disappeared from her home in Chula Vista. CCTV footage showed her arriving home that evening after a visit to a divorce attorney, but she was never seen leaving. The next morning, a black SUV, believed to be driven by Larry, was seen leaving the house and returning about 12 hours later. Maya's family became worried because she did not respond to calls or messages. Her brother visited the house and spoke to Larry, who claimed Maya was locked in a room following an argument. The family returned the next day, and Larry said the same thing, but when they entered the room, it was empty. He said Maya might have gone hiking, but her car was still in the driveway, and her credit card and ID were missing. Maya's sister, Mari, filed a missing person report that night. Investigators learned that Maya's phone last connected at 8:15 p.m. on January 7th, and then went offline at 1:25 a.m. the next day. Police and volunteers searched for her for weeks, covering areas like Mount San Miguel State Park, Sweetwater Reservoir, and nearby creeks. They even checked an abandoned golf course. In late January, police searched the Millete home and found Larry in possession of 16 firearms, some illegally. In May 2021, a gun violence restraining order was placed against Larry to protect the children. Other agencies, including the FBI and Naval Criminal Investigative Service, joined the case. The family's vehicles were impounded for examination. Skeletal remains found in Orange County were tested, but they were animal bones. Maya's family spoke publicly, handing out flyers and putting up posters. Her eldest daughter's birthday passed without her mother there, which was very unusual. CCTV footage later revealed what sounded like 8 gunshots from the Millete home at about 9:57 p.m. on January 7. About half an hour later, Larry was seen playing with his children outside. He did not participate in searches for Maya and cut off her family from seeing the children. Police initially considered the possibility that Maya left on her own after a fight, but no evidence supported this. Larry quickly became a person of interest. He hired a lawyer and stopped cooperating. Investigators found that he had erased all messages between him and Maya. His internet searches were troubling, including topics on spells, black magic, and ways to harm or control Maya. He even created a shrine dedicated to her, smeared with his own blood. Suspicion increased when he asked spellcasters to stop targeting Maya after she disappeared. On October 19, 2021, Larry was arrested for Maya's murder. He was charged with murder and illegal possession of a firearm and pleaded not guilty. A court order prevented him from contacting the children directly, but he later broke this order by calling them hundreds of times. In January 2023, it was confirmed that Larry would stand trial for first-degree murder and illegal firearm possession. The trial was scheduled for January 16, 2024, though it has been delayed several times. 3 years after her disappearance, Maya Millete has never been found. Vigils and searches continue, supported by donations. Billionaire Boys Club murders, Los Angeles. The story of the Billionaire Boys Club murders is one of the strangest and darkest events from Los Angeles in the 1980s. It shows what can happen when young people care more about money and power than anything else. The case begins with Joe Hunt, a very smart young man who grew up in a lower middle-class family in California. His real name was Joseph Gamsky, but his father changed their last name when Joe was young. Joe did very well in school and even won a scholarship to the famous Harvard School for Boys. He was known for having a great memory and for acting older and more confident than most kids his age. In 1983, after finishing school, Joe created an investment group. He called it the BBC, short for Billionaire Boys Club. Joe began recruiting old classmates who came from rich families. Many of these boys had grown up in Beverly Hills and had never worried about money. Joe told them he could make them even richer by investing in the commodities market. Joe was charming, good-looking, and very persuasive. Soon, wealthy twins Tom and Dave May joined the group, and their money helped make the BBC look like a real investment company. Joe encouraged the boys to dress in expensive suits, drive nice cars, and act like they were powerful businessmen, even though most of them had never worked a real job. But the truth behind the group was very different. Joe was not investing their money well. In fact, he was losing money fast. To keep the group going, he began using money from new investors to pay earlier investors, a classic Ponzi scheme. Joe needed a big win to keep everything from falling apart. Then Joe met Ron Levin, a 40-year-old man from Beverly Hills who loved to brag about being rich. Levin showed off fancy checks and talked big about his money. Joe believed Levin could save the BBC by letting him trade millions of dollars in the stock market. At first, things seemed to go well. Levin told Joe he had set up a $5 million trading account for him to use. After 7 weeks, Joe believed he had turned that $5 million into $13 million. He proudly told the other boys that their money troubles were over. But when Joe tried to collect the money, Levin kept avoiding him. Soon, Joe learned the truth. The entire trading account was fake. Levin had tricked him. None of the trades were real, and the $13 million never existed. Even worse, Levin had used the fake account statements to get a large loan for himself. Joe felt humiliated and desperate. He believed Levin had destroyed the BBC, and he wanted revenge. Joe then planned a way to kill Ron Levin. With help from his bodyguard, Jim Pittman, he went to Levin's house one night. They pretended that dangerous men were after Joe for money. Joe claimed Levin owed him. Levin panicked, especially when his beloved dog was threatened. Joe and Pittman forced him to write a check, then killed him. Afterward, they drove the body to a remote canyon, shot it to hide the identity, and buried it. But Joe's troubles were not over. The check Levin wrote bounced. There was no money. Levin had been a con man himself, living on lies and tricks. Joe gained nothing from the murder. Soon after, Joe became involved in a second terrible crime. Another BBC member, Reza Eslamania, said his father was worth $30 million, but would never give him any of it. Joe and a few others agreed to help Reza kidnap his father. They attacked the man at his home, drugged him, and locked him in a trunk. But the man died inside the trunk before they could get the money. They then dumped his body in the same canyon where they believed Levin was buried. Once again, there turned out to be no money. Reza had lied. His father was not a millionaire at all. Some BBC members were scared for their lives and began talking to the police. Police soon searched Levin's home and found something shocking, a to-do list, written in Joe's handwriting, that described steps for committing the murder. This was the evidence they needed. Joe was arrested and later charged with murder. Many people testified against him, including his former best friend Dean Carney, who entered witness protection afterward. Levin's body was never found, which made the case harder, but the to-do list and witness testimony were strong enough. In 1987, at age 26, Joe Hunt was found guilty of murdering Ron Levin and was given life in prison. He was later tried for the second murder, but defended himself and got a hung jury. Still, he stayed in prison for the rest of his life because of the first crime. The Billionaire Boys Club story became famous across the country. In the end, the story is a warning about greed, lies, and the belief that success can come without hard work. Many young men lost their futures, and 2 people lost their lives. It was all the result of looking for shortcuts and wanting wealth at any cost. This is the story of Ed Buck, a well-known political donor who lived in West Hollywood. For many years, people saw him as a rich man with power, money, and influence. But behind closed doors, he lived a very dark and dangerous life. 2 men were found dead in his apartment, and many people began asking why this was allowed to happen, and how he was able to do these things for so long without being stopped. Ed Buck's full name is Edward Bernard Peter Buck. He was born on August 24, 1954, in Ohio, and grew up in Phoenix, Arizona. His family was middle class, and he lived with his parents, a brother, and 2 sisters. He said his childhood was pretty normal, though his mother said he could be a handful at times. When he was 16, he told his parents he was gay. They accepted him, and he went on to college. Buck won an internship that allowed him to travel to Yugoslavia, which at the time was a large country in Eastern Europe. After a year there, he began modeling and even appeared in some commercials. He stayed in Europe for 5 years, living in Paris and Amsterdam. He worked as a fashion model and even modeled in Japan for Wrangler jeans. In 1980, Buck came back to Arizona. He worked for a friend who had a small bicycle delivery business. The business was failing, but Buck saw potential in it. He helped save it and then bought it for $250,000. 5 years later, he sold it for more than $1 million. He became rich at a young age. He tried other business ideas, but not all of them worked. Around the same time, he started getting involved in politics. When Arizona elected a controversial governor named Evan Macomb, Buck led a movement to remove him from office. Many people supported this effort, and Buck became well known in the state. But some people also began digging into Buck's past. In 1983, he was arrested for indecency in an adult bookstore. Later, he was caught trying to fill a fake prescription for a strong painkiller. A judge agreed to drop the charges if he took regular drug tests for a year. By the late 1980s, Buck switched political parties and became active in the Democratic Party. He donated more than $500,000 over the years to Democratic candidates, including Hillary Clinton. To many people, he looked like a respected member of the community. But behind this public face was a very different man. In private, Buck had a habit of preying on young, gay black men. He searched for men who were poor, homeless, or struggling with addiction. Many of these men were workers. Buck would invite them to his apartment with the promise of money. Then, he would give them drugs, mostly meth, and use them for his own desires. One of these men was Jamel Moore, a 26-year-old black man who worked as an escort. On July 27, 2017, Moore was found dead in Buck's apartment. He was naked on a mattress, with drug items all around him. At first, the coroner said the death was an accident caused by a meth overdose. But Moore's mother, Letitia Nixon, demanded an investigation. She said Buck had been hurting young black men for years. Police found syringes, drug pipes, and bags with traces of meth in Buck's home. Moore kept a journal, and the entries showed how much control Buck had over him. In the journal, Moore wrote that he felt like he had sold his soul and that his life was full of pain and drugs. He wrote that he did not want to live anymore and even said, "I'll let Ed Buck do it for now." Despite all this, Buck was not charged after Moore's death. Many people were angry and believed that Buck's wealth and political connections protected him. On January 7, 2019, another man died in Buck's apartment. His name was Timothy Dean, a 55-year-old black man who worked part-time in adult films. After Dean's death, civil rights groups demanded answers. They said it was impossible that two men could die in the same apartment and nothing be done. Even after 2 deaths, Ed Buck still was not arrested. In September 2019, a man who had been staying with Buck ran to a gas station. He told police that Buck had been injecting him with very large doses of meth. He said Buck refused to call for help even when he was overdosing. Buck was arrested and charged with giving drugs to men, causing injury, and running a drug house. In July 2021, Ed Buck was found guilty on 9 federal charges. On April 14, 2022, he was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Some people felt the sentence was too short because 2 men had died, and possibly more, but many felt relief that he was finally held responsible. Grim Sleeper, Lonnie Franklin Jr., Los Angeles. Back in the 1980s, South Central was already struggling with crime. Many people knew about gang-related killers like Luffy from the Rollin' 60s or Ace Capone from the Van Ness gangster Brims. But while those men were killing because of gang life, fights, revenge, or drugs, there was another man who was killing for something far darker. He was not doing it for the streets. He was doing it simply because he enjoyed it. That man was Lonnie David Franklin Jr. Lonnie was born on August 30th, 1952, and grew up in South Central Los Angeles. His parents, Ruby and Lonnie Sr., were strict but caring. They had moved to Los Angeles in the 1940s looking for better jobs. Lonnie's father became a longshoreman and loved working on cars during his free time. He taught young Lonnie all about fixing cars, and by the time Lonnie was 7, he was already allowed to drive. Lonnie loved anything with wheels and anything he could take apart and repair. But while Lonnie was good with his hands, he was not good in school. He was bullied for being short and overweight. He struggled with classes and making friends. When he was 14, his father gave him his first car, which became the thing Lonnie cared about the most. He cruised around the city whenever he could. In high school, Lonnie's parents moved him to a better school in Compton, hoping it would help him succeed. But Lonnie still had trouble, and his problems in class soon turned into behavior problems. At 16, he was arrested twice for stealing cars, and a year later, he was arrested for burglary. Right before graduation, he got into a fight and was expelled. He got a job at a grocery store while trying to figure out his future. His father suggested he join the army, saying it could help him stay out of trouble. Lonnie took the advice and joined in 1971. By 19, he was stationed in Stuttgart, Germany. In the army, he finally seemed to be doing well. He became a corporal and worked as a kitchen supervisor. People around him believed he had finally found the right path. But that changed in April 1974. Late one night, Lonnie and 2 other soldiers stopped a 17-year-old girl named Ingrid, asked for directions, and offered her a ride. Once she got inside the car, the men attacked her. They assaulted her, drove her to a remote place, and Laci even took pictures during the crime. Ingrid pretended to like them, so they would let her go, and it worked. Before she left, Laci even gave her his phone number. Right after, Ingrid went to the police. Officers had her call Laci and tell him to meet her. When Laci showed up, they arrested him. He was convicted and sentenced to a little over 3 years, but he ended up serving less than 1. In 1975, he was dishonorably discharged from the army and sent back to Los Angeles. He did small jobs until he met a woman named Sylvia Castillo. She was a kind, well-known teacher who helped elderly people in the neighborhood. The two fell in love, married, and moved into a home near Western Avenue. They soon had 2 children, Crystal in 1978 and Christopher in 1981. Laci wanted a better job, so he applied to work as a mechanic on LAPD police cars. He loved the work and stayed for about a year before applying for a higher-paying job as a garbage truck operator. The job came with good pay. On the outside, the Franklins looked like a happy family. They threw parties, helped neighbors, fixed cars for free, and were known as friendly people. But inside, Laci was living a double life. His dark side never left. It only hid. On an August night in 1985, a 29-year-old woman named Deborah Jackson left home to repay a loan and promised to return by 10 p.m. She never came back. A man walking his dog found her body in an alley. She had been shot 3 times with a .25 caliber gun. Her body was wrapped in carpet. No bullet casings were found. Deborah had struggled with addiction, but was trying to rebuild her life. A month later, police announced that Deborah and many other women were likely victims of a serial killer the media called the Southside Slayer. People in the community were angry. They felt police were not treating the murders seriously because many victims struggled with addiction, but the bodies kept appearing. In August 1986, Henrietta Wright was found in an alley. She had also been shot with a .25 caliber gun and wrapped in a blanket. Ballistics showed that the same gun killed both Henrietta and Deborah. Then came Barbara Ware in January 1987. A witness saw her body being dumped from a van and called 911. The bullet that killed Barbara matched the same gun again. By this time, investigators were certain they had a serial killer on their hands, one who was very active, very dangerous, and still hunting. As the years went by, the killings continued. Some years were quiet, and other years were filled with fear as more women went missing or were found in alleys, dumpsters, or hidden streets. Then suddenly the murders seemed to stop in 1988. For a long time, people believed the killer might have died, moved away, or gone to prison. But the truth was much more chilling. Lonnie Franklin Jr. was still in Los Angeles the whole time. This long break is what later caused the media to call him the Grim Sleeper, because it seemed like he took a long break from killing. In 2007, everything changed. A young woman survived an attack by a man who lured her into his car. She escaped and gave police a description. Around the same time, new DNA technology helped detectives link old crime scene evidence to a family member of Lonnie Franklin Jr. This was the break investigators had been waiting for. They began watching Lonnie closely. One day, undercover officers posed as restaurant workers and collected a slice of pizza he had thrown away. The DNA on that pizza matched the Grim Sleeper cases. After more than 20 years of terror, police finally arrested Lonnie Franklin Jr. in July 2010. In 2016, Lonnie was found guilty of killing 10 women, but detectives believe his real number of victims could be much higher, possibly over 20. He was sentenced to death and sent to San Quentin State Prison. But in 2020, before his execution date ever came, Lonnie Franklin Jr. was found dead in his cell. Even today, many questions about his crimes remain unanswered. Families still wonder how many lives he really took and how he managed to hide behind a normal life for so long. Sunset Strip Killers, Los Angeles. In 1980, Los Angeles was shocked by a series of horrible murders linked to a couple who would later be known as the Sunset Strip Killers. Their names were Douglas Clark and Carol Bundy, and together they carried out crimes so brutal that many people called them the couple from hell. What made the story even more frightening was that they seemed to care nothing about human life. Their actions were cold, cruel, and shocking even to experienced detectives. During the daytime, the Sunset Strip in Los Angeles was famous for bright lights, music, bars, and beautiful people. But at night, it had a darker side. Many sex workers, runaways, and people struggling with life walked the streets. Police officers who worked the area said it was always busy with drugs, prostitution, and danger. But even they had never seen anything as dark as what happened in the summer of 1980. The first sign of trouble came when two young sisters were found dead near a freeway. Soon after, another young woman was discovered in Glendale, also shot. The victims were mostly women who worked on or around the Sunset Strip, and many had simply vanished from the streets before being found dumped in alleys, bushes, or hills. Women working on the strip became scared to even stand outside. They knew someone was hunting them, but they had no idea who. When one victim was found decapitated and her head taken from the scene, police realized this killer was extremely dangerous, violent, and unusual. By July, at least 6 women had been murdered. The press called the unknown attacker the Sunset Slayer. Detectives were confused. The crimes were so extreme that they believed the killer might be a single twisted man acting alone. They had no idea that the truth would come out only because of a completely different case. This unexpected break began with a man named Jack Murray, an Australian country singer who performed at a bar called Little Nashville in North Hollywood. Jack wasn't a big star, but he had fans, and he enjoyed the attention from women at the bar. One night in August 1980, Jack finished his show and didn't come home. At first, his wife thought he might have slept in his van, something he sometimes did after drinking. But after a full day passed, she reported him missing. Witnesses said Jack was last seen with a woman named Carol Bundy, a 37-year-old nurse who often hung around the bar. A few days later, police found Jack's van. Neighbors had complained about a bad smell coming from it. Inside, Jack's body was discovered. Jack had been stabbed, shot, seriously injured, and his head was severed. Because Carol was the last person seen with Jack, police brought her in for questioning. She walked in with her boyfriend, Doug Clark, a man who acted nervous and kept sweating. Detectives felt something was strange about them, but they had no proof yet, so they had to let them go. Everything changed 2 days later. Carol suddenly appeared at the hospital where she worked and began telling her co-workers disturbing details about murder and body parts. Terrified nurses called the police. Before officers arrived, Carol slipped away and went home. When police reached her apartment, she opened the door, holding underwear that she claimed belonged to Doug's victims. That was the moment detectives realized they had found the key to the Sunset Strip murders. Carol soon confessed. She admitted she had killed Jack Murray herself, but she also claimed Doug Clark was the Sunset Slayer. According to her, Doug had murdered at least 6 young women, and together they had taken part in terrible acts afterward. Detectives were shocked by the level of cruelty in her story. To understand how this all began, investigators looked into the backgrounds of Doug and Carol. Doug Clark grew up in a wealthy family, traveled the world, and went to good schools. He often bragged about intimacy, recorded girls without their consent, and tried to act smart and charming. Many people thought his eyes looked cold and empty. Carol Bundy's life was the opposite. She grew up in deep pain. Her parents were alcoholics, her mother rejected her, and her father abused her. She grew up feeling unloved and unwanted, and she struggled to form healthy relationships. When Doug and Carol met at Little Nashville, she became obsessed with him. Carol felt Doug was the only man who ever paid attention to her, and she was willing to do anything to keep him. Doug knew this, and he used her weakness to control her. Soon Doug's fantasies about hurting women turned real. According to Carol, Doug picked up 2 teenage runaway sisters, Gina and Cynthia, in June 1980. He brought them to his car, shot them, and later bragged about it to Carol. This was only the beginning. From that point, the couple spiraled into a world of violence and cruelty. In the end, both Doug Clark and Carol Bundy were arrested, and their crimes became known as some of the most disturbing in Los Angeles history. Murder of Rebecca Schaeffer, Los Angeles. Rebecca Schaeffer was a young actress with a bright future. She was born on November 6, 1967, in Oregon. Her mother worked as a teacher and writer, and her father was a doctor who focused on child psychology. Rebecca loved acting from a very young age. She acted in small plays, appeared in TV commercials, and took part in department store photo shoots. Even though she thought about becoming a rabbi when she was younger, she later chose acting and modeling. When she was older, Rebecca moved to New York City. She worked as a waitress while trying to become an actress. For a few years, she only got small parts in soap operas and movies, and nothing big happened. But in 1986, her life changed when she got the role of Patty in the TV show My Sister Sam. The show became popular, and Rebecca moved to California for the job. Fans loved her, and her future seemed very bright. Sadly, the show was canceled during its second season, but Rebecca continued working on her career. Around this time, a man named Robert John Bardo became obsessed with her. Bardo was born on January 2, 1970. He was the youngest of 7 children. His father was in the U.S. Air Force, so the family moved many times before settling in Tucson, Arizona. Bardo had a very troubled childhood filled with neglect and abuse. He wrote desperate letters to his teachers, and he was later placed in a foster home. In 1985, Bardo was put in a psychiatric hospital and diagnosed with bipolar disorder. But his parents took him out after 1 month. Not long after, he dropped out of school and worked as a janitor. He also began showing strange behavior and was arrested several times for violent or disturbing actions. Bardo first noticed Rebecca when he saw her in a My Sister Sam commercial. He felt an instant connection and started sending her letters and gifts. Rebecca was known to be kind to fans, so she answered one of his letters. This made Bardo believe they had a real relationship. He recorded every episode of her show and convinced himself she loved him back. He even traveled to Los Angeles several times to try to meet her. Each time he was stopped by security. Bardo had a history of stalking. He had become obsessed with a young activist named Samantha Smith, and later with pop star Debbie Gibson. Each time, he tried to find them in person. His obsession with Rebecca grew more dangerous when he saw her in a film that included a brief, intimate scene. Bardo became angry and felt betrayed, even though she was simply acting. In his mind, he believed Rebecca was supposed to remain pure and innocent. His thinking became darker, and he convinced himself he had to punish her. Bardo read an article about another stalker who found an actress's home by hiring a private investigator. Bardo copied the idea. When Rebecca's agent refused to give him her address, Bardo paid a private investigator to get her home address from DMV records for only $300. On July 18, 1989, Bardo went to Rebecca's apartment building in Los Angeles. When he rang the doorbell, Rebecca came downstairs because the intercom was broken. She spoke to him politely and told him she was busy. She wished him well and closed the door. Bardo went to a restaurant, then came back 1 hour later. Rebecca again came downstairs. She seemed rushed because she was waiting for an important movie script. Bardo told her he forgot to give her something. Then he pulled out a gun and shot her twice in the chest. Rebecca's neighbor heard the gunshots and ran to help, but she died shortly after reaching the hospital. Witnesses saw Bardo flee the scene. Police in Tucson found him walking on the highway, shouting that he had killed Rebecca. He was arrested without resisting. Bardo's trial began in 1991. It was revealed that he had tried to buy a gun earlier but was refused because of his mental health history. His brother ended up buying the gun for him after Bardo promised he would not use it alone. The defense tried to argue that Bardo's mental illness made him unable to plan the murder, but the prosecution said he knew exactly what he was doing. He was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Rebecca's murder led to major changes in the law. In 1990, California passed the first anti-stalking law in the country. Soon other states followed, and by 1996, a federal anti-stalking law was also passed. Her death also pushed lawmakers to protect people's private information. Before her murder, anyone could pay a few dollars at the DMV to get a person's home address. Rebecca Schaeffer's tragic death changed the country. Her story helped create laws that protect people from stalkers and keep personal information safe. Although she lost her life at only 21 years old, the changes made in her name continue to protect many people today.